Hello, Michigan, and welcome to my very first Fireside Chat. My name is Jennifer Kurland, and I want to be your next governor. Today, I'm going to talk about Flint and the Flint water crisis. I believe that this is the number one issue of this gubernatorial race for 2018. The reason being is because the people of Flint still today do not have access to clean, safe drinking water, and the state is culpable and responsible and must do more. I first learned about the Flint water crisis and that Flint had lead in their water at the same time everyone else in Michigan did, which was in October of 2015. And I was going to a conference in Flint, found out about the water, started getting concerned, and then followed the water crisis through my radio show. I spent about 6 months researching all the public documents and information associated with Flint, the Flint water crisis, and the Kurland Water Authority, which is the KWA pipeline, which is part of the reason why Flint switched off of Detroit's water and moved to the Flint River. All of the information I will be presenting to you today is currently available and public on my website, www.kurlandformichigan.com/Flint. I'm going to first skim through a 28-page annotated timeline that covers what happened in the Flint water crisis from 2009 through 2015. At the time of the inception of the KWA, the requirements of treating raw water, upgrades needed to be done for the water treatment plant to properly treat water, and cost estimates of Detroit Water and Sewer Department being more cost-effective than the KWA were clear. The first major document is the preliminary engineering report for the Lake Huron Water Supply Kurland Water Authority, which was published in September of 2009. Some of the important points in this document are that Flint needed $7 million worth of upgrades. Treating water was always a part of the KWA plan. Each community will be responsible for its treatment, and this assumes that KWA will deliver raw water to each member community. Now, this is an important point because this is one of the excuses that has been given by people who caused the Flint water crisis to say that they did not know that water needed to be treated properly. And even in this document from 2009, treatment was never an option. These construction costs are important for a couple of reasons. The first is we obviously know that Flint at the time of the water crisis was under emergency management and is still today a financially stressed city. Although other upgrades at the water treatment plant were identified during this study, only the upgrades necessary to reliably treat raw water from Lake Huron have been included in the proposed project. The reason why I'm highlighting these points to you is that this document was referenced in 2013 when the state was making the decision to use the Flint River and to switch Flint over to the Kurland Water Authority. In the design criteria, all proposed KWA customers are currently supplied finished water from other utilities. What that means is that Flint currently was receiving water that had been properly treated from Detroit, and switching to the Kurland Water Authority would require them to treat their own water in Flint. Per this document and many of the other deals, Flint itself would be required to provide the treatment necessary for local distribution. And in every document up until 2014 and the switch, it was assumed that the water would be treated locally. Some of the upgrades that were necessary to Flint's water treatment plant was in order to store the chemicals needed to treat water properly, as well as all of the systems that supported that treatment. This document not only described corrosion control in great detail, it also included the chemical composition and the physical costs in order to use this treatment. Two things are clear from this information. The first is the state treasurer and other business leaders discussing the changes to the emergency manager law. These businesses have future financial interests in removing decision-making power from locally elected officials, which is a decision made in part by the state treasurer holding this meeting. The second is the clear record of campaign contributions from industries that would financially benefit from a pipeline like the KWA to elected officials who made the decision to switch Flint's water source to the KWA. The clear conflicts of interest by the firm Miller Canfield regarding the KWA bond deal and other subsequent bond deals made for the city of Detroit call to question their involvement in drafting a bill they later received financial benefit from. Since all emergency managers are appointed by the governor and report solely to the governor and the state treasurer, it must be assumed that the governor and the state treasurer have knowledge of all formal EM communications. This report is clear on the costs needed to upgrade the water treatment plant and reflect the same needs as reported in 2009. Additional needs and upgrades to the plant are explained as needed due to the quality of the water. At this time, after 2 reports, the mayor is fully aware of the issues associated with treating water from the Flint River, upgrades needed to be done to the water treatment plant, the difference between raw and treated water, as well as the cost and benefits between both the KWA and Detroit Water and Sewer. The total dollar amount of all upgrades needed in order to upgrade Flint's water treatment plant to use the Flint River as a proper source of water supply is nearly $50 million. The stripping of pay and benefits to the mayor are significant, as the mayor is a full-time employee of the city. Removing or reducing his pay has the potential to create additional potential conflicts of interest from the mayor's inability to support himself and his family financially. The discussion of the KWA also changes between 2009 and the final contract negotiations. It is important to note that initially Lapeer and Sanilac counties were going to sign on to the KWA. This is implying at this time that construction costs would be distributed across all entities. There has never been a question of Flint's dire need for infrastructure repair and replacement. All decision makers at this time are fully aware a majority of the city's water and sewer mains were past their lifespan. Aside from this issue causing high water loss and therefore being a reason behind Flint's costly water rates, it is this knowledge by these same decision makers that must be considered when looking at their future choices. There is a continued increase in pressure placed on the city of Flint to join the KWA, as the entire project is dependent on the city's decision. It is imperative to note that the citizens of Michigan overwhelmingly rejected the expansion of the Emergency Manager Law PA4, and that the Michigan legislature then went against the will of their constituents and pushed through an almost identical bill, PA 436, adding an appropriation so it would be unable to be repealed by citizens again. The report completed by the company Tucker Young Jackson Tull Inc., or TYJT, was done at the request of the state treasurer. This report analyzed Flint's water supply options and again discussed the difference between finished and raw water. The upgrade costs, as well as the long-term costs for being on both the KWA and Detroit Water and Sewer, were evaluated in this report. The cost of improvements to Flint's water treatment plant was again listed as $7.1 million. In nearly every instance, staying on Detroit Water and Sewer was cheaper for the city than switching to the Carignan Water Authority. Another issue of improvements, aside from treating water, was that Flint's water treatment plant did not have a power backup. In case of emergency, the plant would not be able to properly service its customers. The issue of representation was brought up in this document, both for Flint not having a voice on Detroit Water and Sewers Board, but also that even though Flint would be financing a third of the project of the KWA, that they would also have a minority vote on the KWA board. aside from other communities who were not financing the project, be able to sit on the board and vote. While the City Council did vote to join the KWA, there are important factors when considering this vote. The governor's office was aware of this report, and meetings and discussions were being held. The decision of purchasing 18 MGDs is contrary to Flint's water supply needs, as referenced in all prior reports and financial statements. The vote of the City Council was to purchase 16 MGDs. At no time did the City Council ever vote to use the Flint River as a source of drinking water. The decision of purchasing 18 MGDs was not made by the City Council. It was a decision by the emergency manager, adding an additional $1 million in long-term costs to the city. The additional purchase of MGDs, increased capital costs, and declining population means that the residents would have to bear an additional financial burden in their water rates for this deal. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality also has knowledge of potential source water contaminants and upgrades needed at the water treatment plant to properly treat water. It was Emergency Manager Ed Kurtz who signed the order to use the Flint River as a primary drinking water source in June 2013. The needed upgrades of $8 million have yet to be ordered, but it is known as a requirement by those in attendance at the meeting on the 26th. At first glance, the MDEQ's question of water treatment is puzzling, as all prior reports show treatment to be required and part of the necessary upgrades made to the treatment plant. At second glance, the question of treated water coupled with questions about upgrades needed at the plant begin to show that those upgrades were never going to be done, and proper treatment was dismissed over the financial cost to upgrade the plant. In essence, public health was considered to be less important than necessary financial costs. All prior reports on Flint's finances show the city is unable to borrow money or acquire new bond debt due to its financial ratings, aside from the obvious fact that it was under emergency management. Miller Canfield was given a conflict of interest waiver by EM Early to represent the city of Flint and other parties in this bond deal. Kurtz's order to use the Flint River as a primary water source is now a required part of the bond deal. The proposal being worked on by the Department of Natural Resources was part of the administrative consent order and was necessary in order to write the bond deal. There is no compelling evidence that this deal was in any best interest of the city financially or otherwise. The 2014 bond documents again speak to treated water and raw water, and each individual community being required to treat their own water. One of the requirements for Flint in these bond documents was to use the Flint River and treat the water in its water treatment plant. These improvements were never issued, they were never followed up on, and the MDEQ never gave a permit to the city to do the upgrades necessary for Flint's water treatment plant to properly treat water, as required in these bond documents. The $7.1 million in improvements needed to make Flint's water treatment plant be able to properly treat water is now $8 million in 2014. Prior to this bond deal, Genesee County purchased their water from Detroit Water and Sewer through Flint. As of these bond documents, the county switched to using Detroit Water and Sewer on their own, while only the city of Flint started using the Flint River. These bond documents also allow for Genesee County to pay for Flint's portion of the bond debt if Flint could not pay, and then also gave them legal authority to go after the city if Flint could not pay. Because Flint was a financially stressed city, they did not have the proper credit in order to finance and join these bond documents. In order to do so, and in order for these bonds to get approved, they needed permission from the state of Michigan, which they received from the state Treasury Department. These bond documents also again note that the city has a continued structural deficit even though these documents were adding an additional $7 million payment per year from the city's water and sewer rates. At the time these bond documents were signed, the city was only able to sign onto an additional debt of $63 million. Yet the city took on $80 million worth of bond debt in this document. Flint did not have any bond rating ability due to it being under emergency management. There were other additional notes in this document that stated that Flint knew that the KWA was a raw water source and that they needed to treat their own water at their water treatment plant. These documents also reference that Flint had a crumbling water system and a very high percentage of non-revenue water loss, which is the amount of water that comes from water main breaks as well as other leaks in the system. The MDEQ was involved in the ACO and had been in multiple meetings at this point about the $8 million in upgrades necessary to properly treat water and now required by the KWA bond documents. There are no records that show those necessary upgrades were approved by MDEQ at this time. It is important to note that the citizens of Flint expressed their concerns about the use of the Flint River for drinking water before the switch, and complaints began immediately after. It is notable that Flint's residents have made the EPA, CDC, MDEQ, and ATSDR aware of issues with their water supply to the point of discussion between these organizations within 2 months of the switch. Residents were doing their due diligence in making their officials aware of problems with the water quality. By August, the governor was briefed on issues with Flint's water, including waterborne bacteria and warnings on waterborne disease outbreaks associated with these types of water issues. Combined with the first note of complaints by General Motors having auto parts rust from the water, as well as the knowledge of $8 million in upgrades required to be made to the treatment plant in order to properly treat water, this is the first red flag of a serious issue with Flint's water. There is no record of any discussion on approval of these upgrades to be made to the water treatment plant. The MDEQ is aware of a sharp increase in cases of Legionella originating in Flint, combined with the continued complaints about water quality from residents corresponding with health standard violations. The governor's office at this point is also aware that these issues with Flint's water can cause waterborne disease outbreaks. With exception of the county health department, all other parties are aware that $8 million in required upgrades necessary to be made to the water treatment plant in order to properly treat water have not yet been done. The exponential increase in Legionnaires is now known in the governor's office, confirming prior briefings on Flint's potential to harbor waterborne diseases, and coupled with the knowledge that needed upgrades to the treatment plant have yet to be approved or begun. The actions by the governor's office show awareness of issues with Flint's water and issues with properly treating water at the plant. The notes in emails by the MDEQ to the governor's office on Legionella, with statements including speaking in person or over the phone, call to question the lack of FOIA requirements in the state of Michigan. It should certainly be assumed that if issues with Flint's water supply were made public, and if Flint had switched back to Detroit Water and Sewer, it would have had a negative impact on the KWA's ability to sell its municipal bonds and bring scrutiny to the entire bond deal. There is no safe level of lead, and the MDEQ was aware the city did not have an optimized corrosion control program. The funds given to the city by the state were still not for the required $8 million in upgrades to the plant. With the governor's knowledge of water quality issues and Flint's potential for waterborne diseases, the lack of required improvements and the lack of invitation to the CDC show a complete disregard for public health. The prioritization of business over human life continues, and the narrative begins to blame the citizens of Flint for their situation instead of those who made the decisions that created and have continued the crisis. If the MDEQ's narrative of waiting a year and going off of water samples before implementing the lead and copper rule This is now just over 1 year since the switch to the Flint River. The required $8 million in upgrades to the water treatment plant are still not being made. The governor, the state treasurers, the MDEQ, the mayor, the EMs, State Representative Neely, and Commissioner Wright all knew the water treatment plant not only needed upgrades in order to properly treat water, but that those upgrades were required as part of the KWA bond deal. They all knew Flint has water and sewer infrastructure past its lifetime, and that General Motors switched off of the Flint River due to rusting and corrosion of its metal parts. There were plenty of documented discussions that show all parties were aware of issues with Flint's water quality and that public health could suffer. The governor and all other parties continue to ignore the suffering of the people of Flint and continue to place blame on those who have been victimized. There are 30,000 children who will suffer the effects of lead for the rest of their lives, who have yet to receive proper nutritional support from the state. In no way did the people of Flint cause this crisis. One, the state is culpable. The state caused the Flint water crisis, and their decision making and their authority over the people of Flint must be acknowledged, and the state must take action to fix the problems that happened in Flint. Every single sitting state senator and state representative has this information at their fingertips. It is shameful that still today there has not yet been legislation that has been introduced in the state legislature to make Flint whole. This is a huge crisis that must be dealt with, and it will cost money. The state does have a rainy day fund of nearly $1 billion, which is not enough to fix Flint and make them whole. However, it is enough to expedite some of the processes and give some relief to the citizens of Flint right now. So let's talk about the costs. I broke down the expenses based on different categories. The first category is long-term hospital care in Michigan. The average cost of a hospital stay and doctor care for an individual in Michigan is between $5,000 and $45,000 per year. Multiplying that cost by 100,000 residents means that that cost is between $500 million to $4.5 billion. We know that medical costs are one of the most expensive components of the Flint water crisis and making Flint whole. It is my commitment to you, the people of Michigan, that I will work and create a universal healthcare system for our state. Starting first with the people of Flint to make sure that the system would work and that they are the people that get the advantage of having healthcare first, and then expanding that throughout the rest of the state. The next cost is a replacement of service lines, not just the service lines underneath the streets, but the service line inside people's homes that was also damaged by the Flint River water. The average cost to replace home service lines is between $6,000 and $7,500 per home, times approximately 30,000 home service lines, is a total of $180 million to $225 million. One of the other side effects to the Flint water crisis is the water damage done to appliances. Appliances such as hot water tanks, washing machines, and dishwashers were ruined in many residents' homes. The cost to replace a hot water tank ranges anywhere from $25 to $1,277 on average. Multiply that by 5,100 housing units equals a total of $37 million to $65 million. One of the other points of restitution to the people of Flint is to give the city water credits for a decade. This is a really important point when it comes to the city of Flint, not just because it has been recommended by other experts such as Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, but also because the residents of Flint have now a fear of their water. Giving the citizens of Flint a decade-long water credit is also important to bring back government trust to the people of Flint. The last component to making Flint whole is one that is near and dear to my heart, which is public education. The children of Flint must all be considered lead exposed. That is also something that has come from experts. The average annual water bill in Flint is approximately $864. Multiplied by 51,000 units, that is a total of $44 million per year. The state average dollar amount for a child with disabilities is approximately $12,400. Multiplied by 30,000 children, that is $375 million per year. After giving all of this information to the entire state legislature and requesting a response back, I only heard back from 11 lawmakers. In the state house, I heard back from Kevin Hertel, Sam Clint Custo, Kevin from David LeGrand, Clint Sam Singh, Jim Lilly, and Sherry Gay Dagnogo. None of the representatives in our state house were willing to write legislation to make Flint whole. The state senators that responded were Jim Ananick, Steve Beta, Ian Conyers, David Kniezek, and Morris Hood. Out of these five, four state senators stated in their letters back to me that they were willing to sit down and start working on legislation to make Flint whole. These lawmakers were Jim Ananich, Ian Conyers, David Kniezek, and Morris Hood. After receiving these responses, I followed up with each one of their offices. Even after physically going to each one of their offices, I only was able to schedule a meeting with one senator, Ian Conyers, which that meeting was then canceled. What all of these letters show are a couple of things. First is that the Democratic Party in the state of Michigan is all talk and no walk and is not willing to fulfill their obligations to the people and enjoy speaking about the things that they want to do and do nothing to actually follow up and make things happen. The Republican Party in the state of Michigan just doesn't care and doesn't even pretend to. At this time, with all of this information that is out in the public, all of the information that was given to the state legislature, both parties do not care about the people of Flint and about the average resident in Michigan. If we do not do more as citizens to put pressure on our legislature to fix Flint, this will happen again to another community. I urge you to share this video so everyone in Michigan has this information and can start putting pressure on their state legislators to make Flint whole. My pledge to you, the people of Michigan, is to always be transparent and forthcoming. Stay tuned to my Facebook page for future live fireside chats where we can have a back and forth dialogue on this and many other issues. I also need your support. Once 4,167 Michiganders donate $18 towards my campaign, I will become the first Green Party candidate for governor to achieve state matching funds. You can contribute via my website, www.kurlandformichigan.com/donate. Further inquiries on issues important to you can be directed to platform@kurland4mi.com. If you or someone you know is interested in running for office as a Green candidate, please contact my campaign or the state Green Party. I'm very much looking forward to further future dialogues with you all. Thank you again, and have a good afternoon, good evening, and good night.